I don't know how much more you can say. I think that if I were saying things like that, like long live the slaughter of certain people, I think I'd be arrested. I think Sean Fraser knows that he's probably on the wrong side of this. I think in his heart he must know that.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Liberal government has been very vocal at the grandiose, well, what they will often sell as grandiose legislation that they put through or rammed through Parliament through the last session, some of it being changes to the criminal justice system. But our question has always been, what good are laws when the ones that we have aren't even enforced in the first place? Joining us to talk about this and some concerning aspects of our justice system in terms of what does it even mean to be a terrorist and do we even prosecute terrorists is the MLA for Vancouver, Coolshanna, and leader of 1BC, Dallas Brody. Dallas, welcome to Northern Perspective.
Thank you for having me on.
Okay, so this is a serious issue, and I think it's an issue that many Canadians may not even be aware of. A lot of Canadians that follow you are definitely aware of what's going on here. But what we're really talking about is an issue that crosses the lines of the criminal code, civil prosecution, federal law, and really just the state of affairs when it comes to the criminal justice system in Canada. So, for Canadians that don't know the basics of this case, can you give us just a Coles Notes summary of Charlotte Cates and what and who she is?
Sure. So Charlotte Cates is one of the founders of a listed terrorist organization in Canada, a listed organization called Sammy Dune. Recently, they've changed their name, we're not sure why, to something called Al Awdwa, AWDA, Al Awdwa. And so, but it was called Sammy Dune, and it's a listed terrorist entity. Charlotte Cates was an activist who went to school in the United States and then came up here. I'm not sure if she was a born Canadian, but she is leading the pro-Palestinian movement, and particularly, I think she goes across the country, but she's been very active in Vancouver. And the founding location of Sammy Dune is here in Vancouver. There are two founding directors, and she's one of them. And she has been captured on TV screaming, "Death to Canada, death to Israel, death to America," at her events in front of the Vancouver Art Gallery. It's like screaming, yelling, like one of these extremely, long live the Intifada, long live October 7th, may there be more, Intifada, all of this kind of thing. And it said in the open to these groups and protest groups that show up to listen. It's not mild, let's put it that way. And in the summer of 24, she led a rally there. Recall that October 7th happened in 2023, October 7th, 2023, this horrific, horrific attack on an area of Israel. And there was a music festival going on, and the atrocities that happened there were indescribably horrible. And so when she says long live October 7th, that's what she's referring to for people who aren't completely aware of that event. But this event was so traumatizing for people around the world, and in particular, I hate saying just the Jewish community. I'm not Jewish, but I was as horrified as any Jewish person was, but it was just such a grotesque attack. So she was holding rallies in front of the Vancouver Art Gallery back then, and the words she was using and the behaviors and what was happening at her events were serious enough that she was arrested by the Vancouver Police Department. Her home was searched, and charges were recommended against Charlotte Cates. And in order to get a go-ahead on hate speech violations under the Criminal Code of Canada, the hate speech and incitement to violence provisions unlike other charges, require the consent of the provincial attorney general. So the provincial attorney general, we have an NDP government in British Columbia, is a woman named Nikki Sharma, and she did not approve the charges when the police brought this to them. And so Crown Counsel normally has the right to approve charges without asking the attorney general for permission. But in this case, they had to ask permission, and I wasn't privy to the discussions, but the consent was not given. So basically, that file has been languishing on Nikki Sharma's desk now for almost 2 years. And so, because it's now the summer of 2026, I asked the attorney general in the legislature what she was going to do about this and why she was not moving ahead on these charges. And I just got some, sort of a glib answer, or non-answers, which often happens in question period. And then I also posted on X that if you're not going to do it, Nikki, then I'm going to do it. So I did it with my team. We prepared what's called a private prosecution, and it's not something that's limited to an MLA to do this. Any citizen who sees a crime being committed and the police are not taking action, or they haven't seen any charges laid, you can lay a private prosecution under the Criminal Code of Canada. Now, it's not common. It's a difficult process, particularly when you're not familiar with the process, but it can be done, and it's available to citizens of Canada to do this. So we went to great lengths to document. There were at least 7 or 8 identifiable charges that we found, and we decided to go under the terrorist provisions of the Criminal Code of Canada instead of the hate speech and incitement to violence provisions. So these are two separate. The Criminal Code's a big document. It's got a lot of crimes in it, but so there's one section that deals with the terrorism charges. So we went under that. In order to get charges approved for the terrorism charges, once again, you have to get the approval of an attorney general. Only for the terrorism charges, you have to go to the federal attorney general, which is Liberal minister. The attorney general is Sean Fraser. So in August of 2025, I held a press conference outside of the main criminal courthouse in Vancouver. It's 222 Main Street. It's where most charges begin in crime in Vancouver, or in British Columbia, I guess in Vancouver. And I held a press conference saying what I was going to do. Protesters showed up, but I had a huge group of supporters because, in particular, the Jewish community feels very abandoned by our Attorney General on this file. There is no question about that. I'm just one MLA, and in my riding, there is a significant Jewish community, but they were phoning me and people were in tears. The fear that they're feeling in Vancouver about things that are being said is astonishing to people who have lived here their whole lives, in peace. And now suddenly there's a group in Vancouver regularly protesting and saying, like, long live the Intifada. And anybody knows anything about the Middle East, that means basically we're going to wipe out Israel, and uprising, terror attacks, bus explosions, you name it, suicide bombers. This is what, Yasser Arafat brought to the world under the PLO for so many years. So for these chants and these words to be heard in Vancouver is extremely traumatizing for people. In fact, I know many Jewish families who have left Vancouver and even left the country. That's how dangerous they feel this has become for them. So in any event, I had the press conference. I went upstairs and I filed the documents, and then I waited for what's called my process hearing. And I am a lawyer by training. For many years, I was a lawyer, so I was comfortable going into court. I got my process hearing in early December of last year. And I went down and stood in court with the Crown Counsel, who was handling this case, to see if, to arrange the prosecution. Judge came in. I made my argument about why this should go ahead. Crown Counsel says they need the permission of the federal attorney general. I said, I understand that. And there was a back and forth in a hearing. And so the Crown said that they would submit it. We found out, I guess just over a month ago, that they are not, the federal attorney general has denied consent for this to go ahead. And that's where things stand right now. It is a terrible disappointment, um, deeply disturbing as to why, in such an obvious case, that you would not approve charges in this. To my mind, being, I'm a fifth generation Canadian. I, I can't explain it. This is an easy case. I don't know how come an attorney general could look at this and think this is okay. And let's remember the police approved charges. And that's a big step for them. Hate speech is hard to prove because we have, quite a bit of latitude about what you can say in public.
What I immediately am drawn to is the trucker convoy. And you have people like Tamara Leach, people like Chris Barber.
Yes.
They have bounty cancels. They're dancing around. You could argue that the worst thing that Tamara said was hold the line when she was being arrested. But she also said cooperate with the police. Her and Chris Barber are arrested. They go on one of the longest trials for mischief in Canadian history, and they
Mischief.
are sentenced. Yeah. Yet we're talking somebody who is the director of a documented terror organization, named as a terror organization by Justin Trudeau's government in 2024, and is actively out there talking about the death of Canada, the death of Israel, the death of Jews, and the government chooses not to prosecute. This, you just have to wonder, okay, so if there's seriously not two tiers of justice in this country, then what is this? And this is where the questions have to come to the Liberal government and Sean Fraser. What is the level that you would accept here then? If you want to be able to prosecute people for hate speech laws, how does this not rise to that level? And again, to your point, the fact that the police actually laid a charge on this, they felt that the evidence was there. They searched her home, and they probably assumed that this was going to move forward. So
Yeah.
what do you have to say to that?
Well, I find it, breathtaking that it's just extraordinary that Tamara Leach and Chris Barber were charged with mischief, which any criminal lawyer, I did criminal law, is like probably one of the lowest, it's the lowest little charge that you can get, that can be given in the, it's, and they were treated like serial murderers. The process was definitely the punishment for Chris and Tamara. It ruined their lives. They were treated just terribly. And the money they had to spend to defend themselves, the stress, the upheaval in their lives over things, and they were having protests that were completely peaceful. There was, remember, Tamara constantly said to people, only show love, do not get into arguments. They were cleaning up downtown Ottawa. They were giving food to homeless people. All this thing about the Terry Fox Memorial, they were cleaning it up every day. They were keeping the War Memorial clean. There was no litter. It was incredible what they were doing. Yes, they were engaging in civil disobedience, but that we're allowed to do that in this. And remember, it wasn't just those two who suffered, although they were really singled out for absolute destruction. There were all the people who had their bank accounts frozen. Think about that. There were so many people who donated to that, and without any warrants, no warrants, no probable cause, banks participated in freezing the bank accounts of law-abiding Canadians, people who had given to a legal give, send, go account. Nothing they did was illegal, and they had their bank accounts frozen. And these were people, some people needed, everybody needed to get out their money. I mean, it's terrifying. And then some people have been debanked. I mean, this is a new frontier in penalty. So then I look at the things that Charlotte Cates has done, and we come up zero for her, not even her bank account frozen, and recommended charges and nothing. And the things that have happened at her events are very, very serious.
So legally, where is the line between free speech and hate speech?
Hate speech, it usually comes down to an incitement to violence, where you're actually directing your comments at a specific group and encouraging people to express hatred and violence towards that group. So this is the line that you can't cross. There's been another provision added to the criminal code saying that you can't deny the Holocaust in our criminal code. So Holocaust denial is considered a criminal offense in Canada. I'm actually not in support of that because I think that's a dangerous path to go down. And but I mean, obviously I don't like Holocaust denial, but at the same time, I think it's better. We have to have the least limitations on free speech as we can, because as we know, it just goes underground if you try and charge it and it still exists. So you're better to have it out and have it known what's being said, in my view. So really, it's an incitement to violence. Like we saw these things in Rwanda, where there was when that horrible genocide was taking place, and the radio broadcaster, who ironically escaped to Canada and thankfully got deported back, but he came here. He was the one on the radio calling the other tribe like they were insects, they were cockroaches, slaughter them like bugs. They are, when you start calling people vermin, rats, cockroach, like we're getting into what language that was used during the Holocaust to encourage hatred towards an identifiable group.
So when it comes to Sean Fraser, why do you think he refused to allow this prosecution to go forward? Do you think this is now in the dangerous world of political justice, where you have people that are to the right of the Liberals, they're engaging in certain activity that I think many would regard as peaceful protest and exercising their charter rights and freedoms, only to be to be arrested and prosecuted for that, versus people that would identify themselves as on the left, and they're either afraid or there's some sort of trepidation to allow that to go forward? Where are we here?
I think now that I've been in politics for a while, and I'm a rookie, I'm new to politics, but I have to say I believe it's a political calculation. That is so sad for me to say that, but I believe that they're worried about the backlash from the Muslim community, or any group, all these groups that support this kind of thing. We saw, for example, after October 7th, we saw all these encampments allowed to exist on all these university grounds. That should never have been allowed, for them to set up encampments with pieces of plywood, and like it got crazy. I know it happened at UBC, but they allowed it to happen. Whereas I've gone onto a university campus and told, you don't even come on here, you'll be escorted off. And in fact, I have been within 5 minutes of arrival. But this other group, right, is allowed to set up camps and live there, and basically eat food and hang out and party and do what they want for months at a time. So I think we are seeing politics affecting our justice system, which is really wrong. I don't care if someone's on the left or the right. If you're attorney general, you need to see it clearly that this is a violation of the law, because we are getting into dangerous territory here. I'm center right person. So, but even if I saw someone on the center right doing these things and I were attorney general, I'd be like, we got to deal with this. It's not okay for either side to do this. And I defend free speech, but when you start, saying these things like long live the Intifada and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We know what that means. These were the war cries in Israel in 1947, push the Jews into the sea. That's what they were saying. And it's a war cry. And so anyway, and there, like, another thing that happened at one of her rallies is that there were pamphlets given out that explained how to do multifaceted terror attacks. And this is extremely dangerous stuff. And I like the pamphlets. They were how to launch a multi-front terror attack, coordinated attacks, complex coordinated terrorist attacks. I'm not saying she wasn't personally handing out, but these were being handed out at her rally. And Cates also went to Beirut in February of 2025 for the funeral of Hassan Nasrallah, who was the head of Hezbollah. Now, Hassan Nasrallah was the number one terrorist in the world behind Saddam Hussein. And she posted in support of Nasrallah. And I mean, this is a person who's really down for this and believes that the terror attack of October 7th was justified and perfectly fine and long live and let's do it again kind of thing. So I don't know how much more you can say. I think that if I were saying things like that, like long live the slaughter of certain people, I think I'd be arrested.
Well, and I suppose that's my next question is what kind of message does this send to Canadians that certain people can say certain things against certain groups, but other Canadians can't? They'll be arrested.
Well, and just to add on to that, what message does this send to other would-be terrorist groups that they can operate without impunity in Canada?
This is a big concern of mine that we have allowed Canada to become a home for the launch of different groups who are calling for things back in their countries of origin. And we have to stop this. We are not supposed to be a safe place to conduct your glorification of terror from here. Uh, Look at the Khalistan movement. They're not allowed to do that in India, but we're allowing it to happen here. The general thing here is that we are allowing groups to say and do things here that we shouldn't, and it's upsetting the peaceful country that we once were. We never used to see things like this. And I think what it says to Canadians, it's confusing Canadians. It's like, well, if that's not against the law, then what is? And why would you ever hesitate on this? I think Sean Fraser needs to look at the file again, and I would really encourage him to and do this because it's an important message to send to people. We don't want this kind of language and behavior in Canada. It's it's getting out of control, and it's better to stop it early than to allow it to get even bigger and bigger. And it is getting bigger. The protests and the behaviors, and we regularly see horrible anti-Israel and anti-Semitic things spray painted on one of the main bridges in Vancouver, and with the upside down red triangle, which indicates target, and it's a terrorist sign. I phoned the city hall to let them know, and they got over and spray painted over, but no sooner has been covered, but things come back. And, this type of agitation propaganda, agitprop as they call it, does agitate people. And it's normalizing something that really shouldn't be normalized. We need to have lines, whether you're speaking on the right or the left. We need to have lines in the sand about what we want for our country. I mean, the Jewish community has never experienced this kind of thing in Canada. And, I always say first, like the Jewish community, the Christian community is just behind that. So, it should be scary for all of us because I don't consider this just to be a Jewish issue. This is a social issue for Canada. It's our country, and this isn't just limited to the concerns of Jewish people. And I think people need to see that.
Now, this should be a nonpartisan issue, and you're not standing up for this because of your position in politics. You're standing up for this because we're talking about rule of law in this country, and the Liberals are trying to now rebrand themselves as the rule of law party. Well, they have some work to do, evidently. But what message does this also send to the men and women in law enforcement that are doing their jobs every day, trying to protect their communities? They've been criticized for not arresting some activists when they're in certain protests, but it seems that even when they do make an arrest, nothing's done. So what message does this send them when it comes to this type of behavior?
I can only think that it's extremely demoralizing. And good people go into policing to uphold the laws of Canada. They are the enforcement arm. That is their job. Then they go and do it, only to find that all of the hard work they put in, and that would have been hours and days of work that they put into this. It doesn't happen overnight. They have to fill out documents. They had to get a search warrant, on and on. So this could have been weeks, maybe even months of work, all for naught. And I would think it's extremely discouraging. I would be discouraged. And you tend to say, well, why bother? And I'm so grateful for our police at least trying in this case, and good for the VPD for doing the right thing. And but it, I guess, demoralizing and questioning what are we doing here? Are we just sort of people who give out parking tickets now? Is that all we do? Is this what we've been reduced to? And then these, like in Victoria, every week for, I don't know, I think it's been 2 years now, there's been a pro-Palestinian march and the police go out and protect them. And if somebody against the march stands in their way, what do? They remove the person who's trying to stand up to them. They're like, everything seems upside down to me. Why don't you do something about the people who are disrupting the roadways week after week, blocking roads, saying terrible things? And it just seems to me it's backwards now. And sometimes I think it's part of their desire to make all of us really law abiding people feel like things have gone topsy turvy. The law abiding people are subjected to the laws, but the rest of them get to do whatever they want. The people who break the laws a lot. I mean, we're seeing this right down to the level of shoplifting and this kind of thing. People don't get charged anymore.
So, what can Canadians do to help in this case, Dallas? Because a lot of Canadians will be frustrated to hear about this if this is the first time they're hearing about it, and they may want to help. So, what can they do?
The best thing to do is to send a letter to Sean Fraser. And people listening may think, oh, what a waste of time. They're never going to read it. They do read it. They get it. And I know a lot of us have been so demoralized in Canada to think no one ever listens to us anymore at all. I know that's how I felt. That's why I got into politics, because I was so fed up. But the letters do come and they have an impact. And if 1,000 letters hit his desk, that's a big deal. Or 2,000 or 3,000 letters. And you can send a letter for free. I recommend handwritten letters. You can send them for free with no stamp. You just say Parliament Buildings, Attorney General Sean Fraser, and you can put it in an envelope. It can just be one word. I want this case dealt with. It doesn't have to be a long letter. You can, but handwritten letters have an impact, and that's what I would do. And talk to your friends and spread the word and get as many people as you know to send those letters and talk about it with people. Raise awareness. And, I think that's the best thing you can do. And because when I do something wrong, I get letters but the letters that come in support, or I read all of them. And sometimes I think twice about something, and it's important to get those letters. And I think Sean Fraser knows that he's probably on the wrong side of this. I think in his heart he must know that.